A black belt thug mocks an elderly maintenance worker after brutally attacking a teenage girl, laughing as he threatens to put the old janitor in the hospital. The martial arts instructor towers over his victim, boasting about his underground fighting record while his students film what they think will be another easy beatdown. But this quiet maintenance man isn't just any senior citizen. This is Jackie Chan himself. The arrogant bully has no idea he just threatened a legend who spent 50 years turning everyday objects into deadly weapons. While the thug flexes his muscles and shows off his black belt, the 69-year-old icon calmly positions himself near a janitorial cart, his eyes scanning the gymnasium like a chess master planning checkmate. The students keep recording, expecting to capture their sensei destroying some helpless old man, but they're actually filming the moment their world champion instructor meets his match. What happens when a third-degree black belt faces the master of improvised combat? Can decades of brutal street fighting overcome a lifetime of legendary skill? What happened next would shatter the bully's ego for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October morning air carried a crisp promise of autumn as Jackie Chan turned his key in the heavy glass doors of the Riverside Community Center. At 69, his movements retained the fluid precision that had made him legendary, though now they served a humbler purpose, replacing burned-out bulbs and checking heating systems rather than choreographing impossible stunts. "Morning, Mr. Chan," called Rose Martinez from across the lobby, her silver hair catching the early sunlight streaming through the windows. The 68-year-old former union organizer was setting up folding chairs for the senior citizens' Tai Chi class, her weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the slight limp from an old picket line injury. "Good morning, Rose. Beautiful day for slow movements and deep breathing," Jackie replied, adjusting his maintenance coveralls. The name, Mr. Chan, embroidered on the pocket had become his identity here, just another immigrant worker keeping the community center running smoothly. For 3 years, this had been his sanctuary. After decades of death-defying stunts and the crushing weight of global fame, the simple routine of maintaining this aging building in Elmhurst, Queens had given him something he'd never expected to find: peace. The work kept his body sharp and his mind occupied, while the diverse community of elderly immigrants, working families, and neighborhood kids reminded him why he'd fallen in love with America in the first place. Jackie moved through his morning checklist with methodical precision. The heating system in the gymnasium needed attention. The October chill was already creeping through the old building's windows. As he descended to the basement mechanical room, his trained awareness cataloged every sound: the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant murmur of Rose organizing her Tai Chi participants, the gentle wheeze of aging ventilation fans. Halfway through replacing a faulty fan motor, Jackie paused. Through the building's ancient ductwork, he could hear Rose's voice carrying a note of concern as she spoke with Tommy Ricci, the ex-cop turned youth counselor who'd arrived early for his afternoon programs. "Those kids were terrified, Tommy. 3 teenagers jumped on their way home from school yesterday, right in broad daylight. The attackers demanded they join that martial arts school across the street or face worse next time." Jackie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd noticed the Iron Fist Academy since his first day at the community center. Impossible to miss the black-clad students with their predatory swagger and the intimidating music that pounded from their training sessions. More troubling were the younger students he'd observed through their windows, practicing with faces marked by fresh bruises that seemed too systematic to be accidental. Setting down his wrench, Jackie moved to the basement window that offered a view across the narrow street. The Iron Fist Academy occupied a converted warehouse, its windows covered with aggressive promotional posters featuring muscled fighters in combat poses. Even now, at 7:30 in the morning, lights blazed from the upper floors if summoned by his attention. A black SUV pulled up to the academy's entrance. Jackie watched a tall, powerfully built man emerge, blonde hair military short, expensive GI draped over broad shoulders, movements radiating the controlled aggression of someone accustomed to dominating others. The man surveyed the street like a predator marking territory, his cold blue eyes settling momentarily on the community center before dismissing it, as beneath his notice, behind him, a teenage girl with long dark hair followed reluctantly, her body language screaming discomfort as the man placed a possessive hand on her shoulder. Even from this distance, Jackie could read the fear in her posture, the way she shrank from her instructor's touch while maintaining the careful stillness of someone who'd learned that resistance brought punishment. The girl's terror was unmistakable to anyone who knew how to look for it. And Jackie Chan, despite 3 years of deliberate anonymity, had never forgotten how to recognize a predator circling its prey. Marcus Blade Kellerman savored the moment of fear that flickered across Amy Rodriguez's face as he guided her toward the Iron Fist Academy's entrance. At 35, he'd built his reputation on reading weakness, and the 17-year-old had been an open book from the moment she'd walked into his dojo 6 months ago, another broken bird drawn to promises of strength and protection. Advanced training requires advanced commitment, Amy, he said, his voice carrying the practiced authority that had bent dozens of students to his will. Champions don't achieve greatness by staying comfortable. The converted warehouse that housed his academy bore the scars of his teaching philosophy. Bloodstains marked the concrete floors where sparring sessions had gone too far. Mirrors reflected back the hollow eyes of students who'd learned that questioning their sensei brought swift and brutal correction. The walls displayed trophies from underground fighting circuits where rules were suggestions and medical attention was a luxury. Kellerman had discovered early that broken people made the most loyal followers. Amy fit the pattern perfectly. Father dead in a construction accident, mother working double shifts to keep food on the table, teenage girl desperate for someone to make her feel safe in a world that had shown her nothing but violence and loss. He'd started slowly, the way he always did, genuine self-defense techniques mixed with carefully planted seeds of isolation. Your friends don't understand what real strength requires, he'd told her after her first month of training. They'll try to hold you back, make you weak again. Champions surround themselves only with other champions. Gradually, Amy's social circle had shrunk. Phone calls went unanswered. Study groups were skipped for extra training sessions. Family dinners were missed for mandatory seminars on warrior philosophy. Each absence was rewarded with Kellerman's approval. Each maintained connection punished with additional conditioning exercises that left her too exhausted and sore to engage with anyone outside the academy. Now, as October's chill cut through the morning air, Kellerman sensed the culmination of months of careful preparation. Amy had reached the perfect state of isolation and dependence. Her younger brother Luis had started asking questions, but 15-year-old boys were easily intimidated. A few of Kellerman's advanced students had made it clear that continued inquiries about his sister's training schedule would result in after-school encounters that wouldn't end well for the Rodriguez family. The community center has better mats. For what I want to teach you, Kellerman explained as they crossed the street toward the aging brick building. Plus, privacy. Advanced techniques require complete focus. Through the Iron Fist Academy's windows, other students watched their sensei escort his newest prize toward whatever lesson he had planned. Rick Stone, 28 and desperate for Kellerman's approval, nodded approvingly at Maria Santos, 24 and equally hungry for validation through violence. They'd learned not to ask questions about their instructor's private training sessions, just as they'd learned not to inquire about the bruises that marked younger students or the tears that some fighters shed during supposedly voluntary sparring. Matches that Kellerman's hand tightened possessively on Amy's shoulder as they approached the community center's side entrance. He'd studied the building's schedule for weeks, knew exactly when the elderly maintenance worker would be occupied in the basement and the youth programs wouldn't begin for hours. The gymnasium would be empty, soundproof, and perfect for the lesson he'd been planning since Amy's first day of training. Remember, he said, producing a key he'd had copied during a previous reconnaissance mission. Champions do whatever it takes to achieve greatness, no matter how uncomfortable it might seem at first. Amy's silence spoke volumes about the psychological conditioning that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she would have questioned a training session in an unfamiliar building. Now, isolated from friends and family, dependent on Kellerman's approval for any sense of self-worth, She simply nodded and followed him into what she still believed was just another step in her martial arts education. As the door closed behind them, Kellerman allowed himself a predatory smile. After months of preparation, the real training was finally about to begin. The community center's gymnasium felt cavernous in the dim security lighting, shadows stretching across aging basketball courts and exercise equipment like dark promises of what was to come. Amy Rodriguez followed Marcus Kellerman into the space, her gear bag heavy in hands that trembled despite months of conditioning meant to eliminate such displays of weakness. "Lock the door," Kellerman instructed, his tone shifting subtly from instructor to commander. "Advanced training requires absolute privacy. Can't have distractions interrupting your breakthrough moment." Amy hesitated at the door, some primitive survival instinct screaming warnings her conscious mind had been trained to ignore. The metallic click of the lock engaging seemed unnaturally loud in the empty space, sealing her into what she'd believed was a training session but was beginning to recognize as something far more sinister. "Sensei, maybe we should wait until warriors. Don't make excuses." Kellerman's voice carried the edge that had silenced stronger students than Amy. "You've been training for this moment for 6 months. Don't disappoint me now by showing weakness." The gymnasium's isolation became apparent. As Kellerman began pacing the perimeter, his movements predatory rather than instructional. Amy's phone showed no signal in the basement-level room, and the nearest emergency exit was blocked by her instructor's deliberately positioned form. Every escape route had been calculated, every detail planned during weeks of surveillance and preparation. "Today's lesson is about submission," Kellerman announced, pulling off his expensive GI top to reveal the scarred torso of someone who'd learned fighting in places where rules were luxuries and mercy was weakness. "Real combat isn't about forms and techniques. It's about domination, about understanding your place in the hierarchy." Amy's martial arts training, corrupted though it had been by Kellerman's twisted philosophy, finally triggered the recognition she should have felt months earlier. This wasn't instruction, it was predation. The careful isolation, the systematic destruction of her support network, the gradual escalation of inappropriate contact disguised as technique refinement. All of it had led to this moment. "I want to go home," she said, backing toward the locked door. "My brother's expecting me for dinner." "My mom, your family doesn't understand what you're becoming," Kellerman interrupted, advancing with the measured pace of someone accustomed to cornering prey. "They want you weak, dependent, vulnerable. I'm making you strong." Amy's attempt to reach the door triggered the violent explosion she'd feared. Kellerman moved with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd spent years perfecting techniques designed to incapacitate rather than teach. His first strike, a vicious backhand that sent her stumbling into the gymnasium's padded wall, demonstrated the difference between his public persona and his private reality. 6 months of preparation, he snarled, following up with a calculated grab that pinned her against the basketball backboard. "Do you have any idea how much patience that took? How carefully I planned every interaction, every lesson, every moment of trust you thought you were building?" The systematic nature of his assault revealed the true scope of his predatory expertise. Each technique was designed to maintain control while minimizing visible damage, the practiced efficiency of someone who'd refined these methods on previous victims. Amy's screams echoed through the empty building as Kellerman demonstrated that his reputation in underground fighting circuits had been earned through more than simple athletic competition. "This is what real strength looks like," he whispered, his hands tightening around her throat as consciousness began to fade. "This is what happens when champions take what they've earned." Amy's final coherent thought before darkness claimed her was the devastating realization that she'd walked willingly into this trap, that every warning sign had been ignored, every red flag dismissed in her desperate pursuit of the safety and strength that Marcus Kellerman had promised but never intended to provide. As her struggles weakened and finally ceased, Kellerman stood over his unconscious victim with the satisfied expression of someone whose careful planning had achieved its intended result. 6 months of psychological manipulation had delivered exactly what he'd wanted: complete power over another human being, exercised in perfect privacy with no possibility of interruption or accountability. The real lesson, he reflected, was just Beginning point 3 floors above the gymnasium, Jackie Chan's hands moved with practiced precision as he replaced the faulty fan motor in the community center's HVAC system. The mechanical work provided a meditative rhythm that had become one of his favorite aspects of maintenance life. Problems with clear solutions, progress measured in functioning equipment rather than box office receipts or stunt coordinator. Approvals. The building's aging infrastructure held no secrets from him after 3 years of daily familiarity. Every sound had meaning. The normal hum of electrical systems, the predictable groans of settling concrete, the whispered conversations of early arriving senior citizens preparing for their morning activities. Jackie's heightened awareness, honed by decades of split-second timing and constant danger, cataloged each audio signature automatically, which made the sound that suddenly echoed through the ventilation ducts all the more jarring than a scream. Female, young, filled with terror and desperation, cut through the building's morning quiet like a blade. Jackie's hands froze on the wrench he'd been turning, his entire body shifting into the hyper-alert state that had kept him alive through countless movie stunts and real-world confrontations. The scream came again, muffled by distance and the building's structure, but unmistakably genuine. No actress could manufacture that particular combination of fear and betrayal. Jackie had heard similar sounds during his early Hong Kong career, when film sets had been controlled by triads and accidents were often anything but accidental. Setting down his tools with deliberate care, Jackie moved toward the sound's source with the fluid silence that had made his fight choreography legendary. His maintenance coveralls and tool belt might mark him as just another aging immigrant worker, but his approach to the gymnasium level demonstrated reflexes and awareness that belonged to someone far more dangerous than any building engineer. The community center's layout revealed itself as a tactical environment rather than simple architecture. Service corridors designed for maintenance access became potential approach routes. Emergency exits that most people ignored offered strategic positioning opportunities. Even the building's age worked in his favor. Old construction meant solid walls that would contain sound and thick doors that would provide cover if the situation escalated beyond verbal intervention. Reaching the gymnasium level, Jackie moved through shadows toward the main entrance. The small window in the door offered a limited view of the interior, but what he saw confirmed his worst fears about the source of those screams. A teenage girl lay unconscious on the gymnasium floor, her long dark hair spread across the aged basketball court like spilled ink. Standing over her was a tall, powerfully built man in an expensive martial arts gi, his blonde hair military short, and his movements radiating the controlled aggression of someone accustomed to dominating others through violence. Jackie recognized the man from his morning observation across the street, the Iron Fist Academy instructor whose predatory behavior had triggered every warning instinct Jackie possessed. Now those instincts were being validated in the most horrific way possible as the man began removing his belt with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual before. The decision that followed required no conscious thought. Jackie had spent his entire career protecting people, co-stars from dangerous stunts, children from exploitation, audiences from cynicism through stories that proved heroes could still exist in a complicated world. The quiet maintenance worker might prefer anonymity, but the protector underneath had never really retired. Using his master key with movements that made no sound, Jackie unlocked the gymnasium door and stepped inside. The janitorial cart positioned near the entrance offered both cover and potential weapons: cleaning supplies that could blind an attacker, a mop handle that could serve as a staff, wheels that could provide mobility in combat. Most importantly, Jackie positioned himself directly between the unconscious girl and her attacker, creating a human barrier that would have to be moved before any further harm could be inflicted. His posture appeared casual to untrained eyes, but was actually perfectly balanced for explosive movement in any direction. "Excuse me, sir," Jackie said, his voice carrying the polite but unyielding tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "The building is closed. You need to leave immediately." Marcus Kellerman spun around, his face cycling through surprise, rage, and finally contemptuous amusement as he took in the elderly maintenance worker who dared interrupt his carefully planned assault. The predator had been discovered, but he clearly believed his physical advantages and martial arts training made this interruption nothing more than a minor inconvenience. He was about to discover just how wrong that assumption could be. Marcus. Kellerman's initial shock dissolved into predatory amusement as he processed the sight before him. An elderly janitor in maintenance coveralls, tool belts sagging around his waist, standing between him and his unconscious prize. The interruption was irritating but hardly threatening. If anything, it provided an opportunity to demonstrate the consequences of interfering with his business. "You've got to be kidding me," Kellerman laughed, his voice echoing off the gymnasium walls. "Get out of here, Grandpa, before you get hurt. This is none of your concern." Jackie knelt beside Amy's motionless form, his fingers finding her pulse with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed emergency medical checks on countless movie sets. Strong and steady, unconscious but not critically injured. Her breathing remained regular despite the finger-shaped bruises already darkening around her throat. "The girl needs medical attention," Jackie said calmly, his eyes never leaving Kellerman's face while his peripheral vision tracked every potential weapon and escape route in the gymnasium. "I've called security. Please step back." The lie was delivered with such conviction that Kellerman hesitated momentarily. Jackie's tone carried an authority that seemed incongruous with his humble appearance, suggesting reserves of confidence that extended far beyond typical maintenance worker training. "You called nobody, old man," Kellerman snarled, his uncertainty transforming into rage at being challenged by someone he viewed as categorically beneath his notice. "You want to know what happens to heroes in the real world? They get broken." Kellerman began circling with the measured pace of a predator sizing up prey, his underground fighting experience evident in the way he moved. Always maintaining balance, constantly evaluating angles of attack, positioning himself to cut off retreat routes. His scarred knuckles and the casual violence of his posture spoke to years of inflicting damage on opponents who couldn't fight back effectively. "Third-degree black belt," he announced, as if credentials could intimidate someone into submission. 15 years of underground fighting. 43 professional victories, 0 defeats. I've hospitalized men half your age for less disrespect than you've already shown. Jackie continued his medical assessment of Amy while secretly cataloging the gymnasium's defensive possibilities. The rolling janitorial cart offered mobility and improvised weapons. Exercise equipment could serve multiple tactical purposes. Even the basketball backboards could become springboards for aerial attacks if the situation demanded creative solutions. "She's just a girl," Jackie said quietly, his voice carrying depths of controlled emotion that made Kellerman's threats sound hollow by comparison. "Whatever you think you're accomplishing here, it ends now." "What I think?" Kellerman's voice rose to a shout that emphasized the gymnasium's soundproof isolation. "I know exactly what I'm accomplishing. 6 months of preparation, careful planning, psychological conditioning. And you think some ancient janitor can just walk in and ruin everything?" The revelation of systematic predatory behavior confirmed Jackie's worst suspicions about Amy's situation. This wasn't spontaneous violence, but calculated long-term abuse, which made Kellerman infinitely more dangerous than a simple opportunistic attacker. "You want to play hero?" Kellerman demanded, his patience finally snapping as he realized Jackie wouldn't be intimidated into abandoning his protective position. "Fine, I'll put you in the ground next to her." Kellerman launched a devastating haymaker aimed at Jackie's skull, expecting to end the confrontation with a single blow that would demonstrate the futility of challenging someone with his training and physical advantages. Instead, Jackie effortlessly ducked under the punch while simultaneously sweeping Kellerman's supporting leg with the mop handle, causing the younger man to stumble and crash heavily into the gymnasium's basketball backboard. Kellerman recovered from his stumble with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to taking punishment, but his expression now carried genuine surprise rather than casual contempt. The elderly maintenance worker had moved with impossible speed and precision, demonstrating reflexes that belonged to someone far younger and infinitely more skilled than any janitor should possess. "Lucky shot, old man," Kellerman growled, though his defensive posture suggested he no longer considered this confrontation a guaranteed victory. "Won't happen again." What followed transformed the gymnasium into an arena showcasing two completely different fighting philosophies. Kellerman attacked with the brutal efficiency of underground circuits, direct strikes designed to inflict maximum damage, grappling techniques meant to break bones, combinations that prioritized ending fights quickly through overwhelming violence. Jackie responded with something that seemed like choreographed poetry but was actually combat refined through decades of real-world application. The janitorial cart became a mobile weapons platform, launching bottles of cleaning supplies as projectiles while providing a rolling shield against Kellerman's increasingly desperate attacks. Every piece of gymnasium equipment served multiple purposes. Exercise bikes spun into barriers, basketball hoops became pivot points for aerial maneuvers, wrestling mats were used to redirect momentum rather than absorb impact. Kellerman found himself constantly off balance as Jackie's improvised fighting style turned the entire environment into a weapon. A floor buffer became a trip hazard that sent the younger man sprawling. Elastic resistance bands transformed into restraints that temporarily immobilized his arms. Even the gymnasium's sound system was incorporated when Jackie used the speaker wires to create snares that caught Kellerman's feet during his more aggressive rushes. "What the hell are you?" Kellerman panted, sweat streaming down his face as he realized that none of his underground fighting experience had prepared him for an opponent who treated combat like an elaborate puzzle to be solved creatively rather than a simple application of superior force. Jackie's response came through action rather than words. Grabbing a volleyball from the equipment cart, he ricocheted off 3 different surfaces before it struck Kellerman in the back of the head with perfect timing, staggering him forward into a perfectly positioned gymnastics pommel horse that caught him in the solar plexus and left him gasping for breath. The entire sequence demonstrated not just physical skill, but an understanding of physics, geometry, and tactical improvisation that suggested training far beyond anything available to civilian martial artists. Kellerman was fighting someone who thought in 3 dimensions and saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles. Despite his obvious disadvantage, Kellerman's pride prevented any consideration of retreat. His reputation in underground fighting circuits had been built on never backing down from any challenge, no matter how impossible the odds appeared. That same arrogance now blinded him to the reality that he was facing an opponent whose skills existed in an entirely different category than anything he'd previously encountered. The gymnasium door's sudden opening interrupted their combat with a metallic clang that echoed through the space like a gunshot. Bobby Patterson, the building's 52-year-old night security guard, stepped through the entrance with his flashlight and radio, taking in the scene with the wide-eyed expression of someone who couldn't quite process what he was witnessing. Amy Rodriguez lay unconscious near the far wall. Marcus Kellerman stood battered and breathing heavily in the gymnasium's center, his expensive GI torn and stained with sweat. And an elderly maintenance worker appeared barely winded despite clear evidence of intense physical activity. That Bobby's eyes moved from Jackie's face to the old movie posters covering his father's garage walls, recognition dawning with the slow inevitability of sunrise. "Oh my God," Bobby whispered, his voice carrying reverence and disbelief in equal measure. You're Jackie-chan." Jackie's expression showed resignation rather than surprise, as if he'd always known this moment would eventually arrive. Despite 3 years of careful anonymity, the revelation of Jackie's identity transformed the gymnasium's atmosphere from private confrontation to public spectacle. Bobby Patterson's radio crackled to life as he called for paramedics and police backup, while Marcus Kellerman stared in stunned disbelief at the maintenance worker who'd just systematically dismantled his fighting technique. "This can't be happening," Kellerman muttered, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose entire worldview was collapsing in real time. "I was beaten by some washed-up movie star playing dress-up as a janitor?" Jackie knelt beside Amy Rodriguez as paramedics arrived, his gentle assessment of her injuries contrasting sharply with the combat skills he displayed moments earlier. The teenager stirred as consciousness returned, her first words confirming the assault that had brought Jackie into the gymnasium. He said this was training," Amy whispered, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of Kellerman's deception became clear. 6 months of lies. He made me trust him." Detective Lisa Moreau arrived with the responding officers, her experienced eyes immediately recognizing both the celebrity status of the witness and the potential media nightmare this situation represented. At 45, She'd handled enough high-profile cases to understand that Jackie Chan's involvement would transform a simple assault case into international news. Mr. Chan, she said professionally, producing her notebook while crime scene photographers documented the gymnasium. I need to understand exactly what happened here. Jackie's statement was precise and factual, delivered with the calm authority of someone accustomed to dealing with legal complications. He described hearing Amy's screams, investigating the disturbance, finding Kellerman assaulting an unconscious teenager, and intervening to protect her from further harm. The suspect made multiple threats and initiated physical violence. Jackie explained, I used minimal necessary force to neutralize the threat and protect the victim until authorities arrived. Kellerman's arrest proceeded with the mechanical efficiency of criminal processing, but his threats continued even as handcuffs were applied. The humiliation of being defeated by someone he dismissed as a harmless old man had shattered his carefully constructed self-image, replacing arrogant confidence with desperate rage. This isn't over, old man, Kellerman shouted as officers led him toward their patrol car. You think hiding behind some ancient movie fame will protect you? I've got friends, connections, people who understand what real strength means. The threat carried specific menace that extended beyond simple criminal bravado. Kellerman's underground fighting background suggested access to networks that operated outside legal boundaries, criminal organizations that viewed Jackie's intervention as a challenge to their territorial control. You have no idea what you just started, Kellerman continued, his voice echoing through the community center's corridors. This is my neighborhood now. These are my streets. You just made an enemy of everyone who matters. Detective Moreau questioned Jackie privately about his background and current living situation, learning about his desire for anonymity and normal life. Her expression suggested understanding of the complications his celebrity status would create for what should have been a straightforward assault case. Mr. Chan, I have to warn you, she said quietly. Kellerman's not just some neighborhood bully. Our intelligence suggests connections to organized crime, drug trafficking, possibly human trafficking. His dojo's been under surveillance for months. Jackie absorbed this information with the grim resignation of someone who'd hoped his heroic days were permanently behind him. 3 years of peaceful maintenance work had just ended with a single decision to protect an innocent teenager from a predator. As the police cars disappeared into the night, their red and blue lights fading like dying embers, Jackie stood alone in the community center's parking lot. The building he'd come to love as a sanctuary now felt like a target, marked for retaliation by forces he'd inadvertently challenged. Bobby Patterson approached with the awkward respect of someone meeting a childhood hero under impossible circumstances. Mr. Chan, he said hesitantly, my father's got every one of your movies. Used to say you were the only action star who cared more about protecting people than looking tough. Jackie's smile carried more sadness than satisfaction as he looked back at the community center's damaged entrance. Sometimes protecting people means giving up the quiet life you thought you'd earned, he replied, understanding that his peaceful retirement had just become another casualty of choosing to do what was right rather than what was safe. Dawn broke over Elmhurst with the pale light of October morning filtering through the Iron Fist Academy's windows, illuminating a scene of barely controlled chaos. Marcus Kellerman's arrest had created a power vacuum that his most devoted students were struggling to fill, their combination of grief, rage, and confusion threatening to explode into something far more dangerous than their sensei's individual predatory behavior. Danny Kim arrived at the academy to collect his gear from a locker he'd abandoned 3 months earlier, when Kellerman's increasingly violent teaching methods had finally overcome his fear of confrontation. The 22-year-old former amateur champion moved through the converted warehouse with the careful awareness of someone entering hostile territory, noting how his former training partners had divided into opposing factions. Rick Stone, 28, and desperate to prove himself worthy of inheriting Kellerman's authority, held court near the heavy bags with a group of the academy's most violent students. Maria Santos, 24 and equally hungry for validation through intimidation, organized another faction that viewed Stone's leadership claims with open hostility. Both groups shared one common target for their rage: the elderly maintenance worker who'd humiliated their sensei. He's not just some random old guy, Stone announced to his followers. his voice carrying the fervent intensity of someone whose entire identity had been built around hero worship of a fallen idol. Bobby Patterson from the community center called it in. We're talking about Jackie fucking Chan, the actual movie star. The revelation rippled through the academy with electric intensity. Several students pulled up YouTube videos on their phones, comparing the aging face of the maintenance worker to classic action movie scenes from the 1980s and 1990s. The match was undeniable, which made their sensei's defeat infinitely more humiliating. Kellerman always said old movies were fake. Maria Santos spat, her voice carrying the bitter disappointment of someone whose belief system had been systematically destroyed. Said real fighters would destroy those Hollywood phonies in actual combat. Now our sensei's in jail because some washed-up stuntman got lucky. Word of Jackie's identity spread through the neighborhood with the viral intensity of social media gossip. Older residents who remembered his films reacted with excitement and pride at having a legitimate action hero living among them. Younger community members saw opportunity for selfies and social media content, but Kellerman's followers viewed the revelation as proof that their way of life was under attack by forces beyond their understanding. The graffiti appeared on the community center's walls during the pre-dawn hours, spray-painted by students who'd learned that anonymous vandalism was safer than direct confrontation with someone who'd already proven capable of dismantling their best fighter. "Old man's gonna pay" stretched across the brick facade in letters 3 feet tall, accompanied by more specific threats targeting Jackie's daily routine. Rose Martinez discovered the damage during her morning arrival, her expression cycling through anger, fear, and determination as she surveyed the systematic destruction. Windows had been broken with surgical precision, enough to send a message without triggering serious police response. The building's entrance bore multiple impact marks from what appeared to be martial arts weapons. "They're not just coming after you, Jackie," she said as he arrived for his shift, her voice carrying the grim authority of someone who'd faced down corporate intimidation during decades of union organizing. "They're coming after all of us. Anyone who supports you, anyone who uses this building, anyone who represents what they see as weakness." Jackie surveyed the damage with the tactical assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. The vandalism was clearly intended as psychological warfare rather than simple property destruction. The message was unmistakable. His intervention to save Amy Rodriguez had escalated beyond personal conflict into territorial warfare that would engulf the entire community. Tommy Ricci arrived with several senior citizens who'd witnessed the vandalism, but been too frightened to intervene during the night. The ex-cop's expression suggested professional concern about the systematic nature of the attack and its implications for community safety. "This is just the beginning," Tommy warned, his police experience providing context that civilians might miss. "Kellerman's students are going to escalate until someone makes them stop. Question is, are we going to let them terrorize this neighborhood, or are we going to fight back?" As Jackie looked at the worried faces of elderly community members who depended on the center for social connection and basic services, he realized that his desire for quiet anonymity had become another luxury he could no longer afford. The war for Elmhurst had begun, and retreat was no longer an option. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the community center's vandalized entrance as Jackie surveyed the damage with Rose Martinez and Tommy Ricci. Broken glass crunched underfoot while elderly Tai Chi participants gathered nervously behind them, their morning routine disrupted by the reality of escalating violence in their sanctuary. Luis Rodriguez arrived breathless from his overnight vigil at Elmhurst Hospital, where his sister Amy was recovering from her assault. The 15-year-old's face carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who'd aged years in a single night, but his voice remained steady as he delivered crucial intelligence about their enemies' next moves. "I saw them," Luis reported, glancing around nervously before continuing. "Rick Stone and 5 other guys from the academy. They were watching the hospital parking lot around midnight, talking about making examples of people who support you. They mentioned Mrs. Chun from the grocery store, Mr. Petrov from the hardware shop, anyone who's been nice to you since you started working here." The systematic nature of the threat became clear as Tommy shared information from his police contacts. Iron Fist Academy students had been conducting surveillance throughout the neighborhood for weeks, identifying vulnerable targets and cataloging the daily routines of community members who might serve as pressure points against Jackie's continued presence. They're not just angry about Kellerman's arrest, Tommy explained, his ex-cop instincts recognizing the tactical sophistication behind what appeared to be random violence. This is territorial control. They want to prove that protecting you brings consequences, that standing up to them costs more than it's worth. Rose Martinez listened with the grim expression of someone who'd faced similar intimidation during her union organizing days, when corporate security teams had used identical tactics to break worker solidarity. Her weathered hands clenched into fists as she processed the scope of the threat facing her adopted community. Bullies always target the vulnerable first, she observed. They'll go after the elderly people in Tai Chi class, the teenagers in after-school programs, the families who use our daycare services, anyone who can't fight back effectively. Jackie absorbed this information while studying the building's layout with new tactical awareness. The community center's age and design created numerous security vulnerabilities. Multiple entrances that couldn't be monitored simultaneously, large windows that offered clear sight lines for surveillance, parking areas that provided cover for attackers. Danny Kim approached hesitantly from across the street, his conscience finally overcoming the fear that had kept him silent during months of witnessing Kellerman's abuses. The former amateur champion carried a gym bag containing evidence he'd been too terrified to reveal, while his sensei remained free to retaliate. "There's something you need to know," Danny said, producing photographs and written records from his bag. "Kellerman's been planning this for months. Not just Amy's assault, the whole takeover of this neighborhood. He's got connections to drug dealers, loan sharks, people who make money from keeping communities scared and divided." The photographs showed systematic surveillance of the community center, detailed floor plans, and schedules of activities that revealed months of preparation for what was clearly intended as a criminal enterprise expansion rather than simple martial arts instruction. "They called it establishing territory," Danny continued. "Use the dojo as headquarters, intimidate local businesses into paying protection money, recruit teenagers as street dealers and enforcers. Your intervention didn't just save Amy, you destroyed months of careful planning." Jackie realized that his quiet maintenance worker life had inadvertently placed him at the center of organized crime's attempt to claim Elmhurst as new territory. The stakes extended far beyond personal revenge into community survival. The community center's main hall filled with an unlikely coalition as word spread through Elmhurst's diverse neighborhoods. Senior citizens arrived early, their aluminum walkers and worn cardigans belying the steel in their eyes as they claimed front-row seats for what everyone understood would be a declaration of war. Parents with children in after-school programs sat beside small business owners tired of intimidation, while teenagers like Luis Rodriguez clustered near the back with the nervous energy of young people discovering their voices. Jackie addressed the gathering not as a movie star, but as a neighbor who understood that everyone present faced the same fundamental choice: submit to systematic intimidation or stand together against forces that viewed their community as territory to be conquered, rather than people deserving respect. "They're counting on us being too scared to unite," Jackie explained, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him a natural leader throughout his career. "Bullies always attack isolated targets because they can't handle organized resistance." Rose Martinez took control of the practical logistics with the efficiency of someone who'd organized countless union meetings under far more dangerous circumstances. She divided volunteers into shifts, ensuring the building would never be unoccupied, created communication networks using both cell phones and old-fashioned door-to-door visits, and established supply chains for everything from coffee to emergency medical supplies. During the textile strikes, management hired thugs to break our picket lines, Rose told the assembled crowd. "We learned that standing together meant more than just physical presence. It meant creating systems that couldn't be disrupted by targeting individual leaders." Tommy Ricci used his police contacts to establish increased patrol presence, though he warned everyone that official protection would be limited by legal constraints and department resources. His law enforcement experience provided tactical advice about defensive positioning, emergency protocols, and evidence documentation that could support future prosecutions. "We're not vigilantes," Tommy emphasized. We're citizens exercising our right to protect our community through legal means. Everything we do has to be something we can explain to a judge if this escalates to criminal trials. The meeting revealed unexpected reserves of strength among people who'd seemed helpless when isolated. Mrs. Chun, the 73-year-old grocery store owner, had survived the Cultural Revolution and wasn't about to be intimidated by spoiled American bullies. Mr. Petrov, the Russian hardware store proprietor, had military experience that included urban combat training. Even the teenagers brought valuable assets. Luis Rodriguez's generation understood social media warfare and had networks that could spread information faster than any official communication system. Danny Kim stood to address the group, his voice carrying the weight of someone seeking redemption through truth-telling. He revealed that several other Iron Fist students wanted to escape Kellerman's influence, but were trapped by fear of retaliation, debt bondage, or criminal records that made them vulnerable to blackmail. Rick Stone's got maybe 15 hardcore followers who'll do anything he says, Danny reported. But there are 30 other students who joined for legitimate self-defense training and got caught up in something they never wanted to be part of. If we can show them there's a way out, the Academy's power base starts crumbling. Jackie felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he looked around the room, filled with determined faces. These weren't trained fighters or professional security personnel. They were ordinary people who decided that their community was worth defending regardless of personal risk. As the meeting concluded, Amy Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, supported by a wheelchair, but insisting on addressing the crowd that had gathered to protect her and others like her. Despite her obvious pain and trauma, her voice carried clear determination as she spoke. "They hurt me because I was alone and scared," Amy told the assembled community members. "But they can't hurt all of us if we stand together. Mr. Chan saved me. Now we save each other." Her courage solidified everyone's resolve to fight back against the systematic intimidation that had been growing in their neighborhood for months. Saturday afternoon brought unseasonable warmth to Elmhurst. Perfect weather for the community center's monthly children's birthday party. 8-year-old Emma Ricci's celebration filled the gymnasium with balloons, streamers, and the joyful chaos of 30 children enjoying cake and games while their parents maintained nervous vigilance near every entrance. Jackie helped coordinate party activities while conducting subtle surveillance, his trained awareness cataloging every vehicle that passed the building and every face that appeared near the windows. The festive atmosphere provided cover for the defensive preparations that had transformed the community center into something resembling a fortress disguised as a neighborhood social hub. Rose Martinez organized pin the tail on the donkey with military precision, positioning herself where she could observe both the main entrance and the emergency exits. Tommy Ricci stationed himself near the front door with his hand never straying far from the concealed carry permit that his police service had authorized, while Danny Kim monitored social media for any indication that Iron Fist students were planning immediate retaliation. The children's laughter created a stark contrast to the underlying tension as parents whispered about broken windows and threatening phone calls that had escalated throughout the week. Luis Rodriguez helped serve cake while coordinating teenage lookouts positioned throughout the neighborhood, their cell phones creating an early warning network that could provide precious minutes of advance notice if Iron Fist students approached the building. Amy Rodriguez attended despite her injuries, her wheelchair decorated with balloons that transformed medical necessity into party participation. Her presence served as a powerful reminder of what was at stake. Not just adult pride or territorial control, but the safety of an entire generation of children who deserved to grow up without fear. At precisely 3 o'clock, as the children were playing musical chairs and parents were beginning to relax their vigilance, the community center's main entrance exploded inward with the systematic efficiency of a military assault. 6 Iron Fist students led by Rick Stone burst through the doors, their movements coordinated and their intentions unmistakably violent. "Where's the famous Jackie Chan when kids are in danger?" Stone shouted, his voice carrying across the gymnasium, like a challenge designed to provoke exactly the response he was seeking. "Let's see if movie stars can protect real families when the cameras aren't rolling." Parents immediately moved to shield their children as Stone's followers spread out with tactical precision, cutting off escape routes while maintaining enough distance to avoid being cornered if Jackie chose to engage. Their positioning revealed planning and rehearsal. This wasn't spontaneous violence, but calculated psychological warfare designed to demonstrate that nowhere was safe from iron fist retaliation. Jackie stepped forward from behind a party table, loaded with cake and decorations, his expression transforming from friendly neighbor to something far more dangerous despite the colorful party hat still perched incongruously on his head. The juxtaposition of festive celebration and imminent violence created surreal tension as everyone present understood they were witnessing the moment when community defense theory became brutal reality. "This is a children's party," Jackie said, calmly, positioning himself between the Iron Fist students and the nearest group of terrified kids. "Take your grievances outside. These families have nothing to do with our conflict." Stone's laugh carried genuine malice as he surveyed the scene. 30 frightened children, dozens of panicked parents, and one elderly maintenance worker standing between them and whatever lesson the Iron Fist Academy intended to teach about the consequences of challenging their authority. "Everything in this neighborhood has to do with our conflict now, old man," Stone replied. "You made it personal when you destroyed our sensei. Time to learn what happens when legends face real-world consequences." The party supplies and decorations suddenly took on tactical significance as Jackie's legendary improvisational skills transformed a children's celebration into a battlefield where anything could become a weapon. What followed transformed the community center's gymnasium into a showcase of creative combat that balanced maximum efficiency with absolute protection of innocent bystanders. Jackie's legendary ability to weaponize any environment reached new heights as children's party supplies became an arsenal limited only by imagination and the desperate need to end the confrontation without allowing any harm to reach the terrified families trapped in the crossfire. Balloons filled with helium became blinding projectiles that burst against attackers' faces, temporarily disorienting them while creating opportunities for more decisive action. The birthday cake's metal serving table transformed into a mobile shield that deflected punches while providing a platform for launching coordinated counterattacks using everything from plastic forks to decorative streamers. Rick Stone found himself entangled in party banner streamers that Jackie wielded like tactical rope, binding the Iron Fist student's arms while using his momentum to redirect him into a collision with the gymnasium's padded wall. The colorful "Happy Birthday" message wrapped around Stone's torso became both restraint and humiliation as he struggled against decorations designed for 8-year-old entertainment. The other Iron Fist students discovered that attacking someone surrounded by 30 children's worth of party supplies was like fighting in a minefield of improvised weapons. Jump ropes became snares that caught feet and sent attackers sprawling. A piñata stick in Jackie's hands turned into a precision instrument that struck pressure points with surgical accuracy, dropping opponents without inflicting permanent damage. Parents evacuated children through the emergency exits, while Jackie methodically dismantled the Iron Fist assault team using playground equipment that bordered on the surreal. A seesaw became a catapult that launched one attacker into the basketball backboard. Swing sets provided anchor points for aerial maneuvers that seemed to defy both gravity and the limitations typically imposed by advanced age. Tommy Ricci coordinated the evacuation while providing tactical support, his police training evident in the way he directed families away from potential danger zones while maintaining clear sight lines for Jackie's increasingly elaborate combat choreography. The ex-cops radio crackled with reports of approaching sirens as neighbors called in reports of the assault. The fight spilled through the community center's emergency exit into the outdoor playground, where Jackie's environmental awareness transformed children's recreational equipment into an elaborate obstacle course that showcased every aspect of his legendary stunt work. Monkey bars became overhead highways for aerial attacks. Slides were used as ramps for impossible angle approaches. Even the sandbox served tactical purposes as loose sand created footing problems for attackers while providing cover for defensive positioning. Maria Santos, arriving as backup with 3 additional Iron Fist students, found herself facing not just Jackie's individual skills, but a coordinated community defense that had learned to work together during weeks of preparation. Rose Martinez led senior citizens in surrounding the playground with garden hoses, creating water barriers that limited the attackers' movement options while providing cover for the ongoing evacuation. Luis Rodriguez and his teenage network proved invaluable as scouts and messengers, their knowledge of neighborhood geography allowing them to guide families to safety through routes that avoided potential ambush points. Danny Kim used his insider knowledge of Iron Fist tactics to predict their movements, calling out warnings that allowed Jackie to stay one step ahead of increasingly desperate attacks. Police sirens grew louder as the confrontation reached its climax, with Jackie subduing the last attacker using a combination of playground swing chains and several jump ropes, creating a perfectly humane but completely effective restraint system that left Rick Stone and his followers immobilized but uninjured. As officers arrived to arrest the Iron Fist students, Stone's final words carried ominous promise rather than defeat. "This isn't over. You think you can hide behind these people forever? We know where you live, where you work, where you shop. Marcus was right. You're going to pay for what you did." The children cheered as Jackie removed his party hat and helped clean frosting from his maintenance uniform. But the parents' expressions showed they understood the threat had escalated far beyond simple harassment into something that would require much more serious measures to resolve. The institutional gray walls of Rikers Island Correctional Facility muffled most sounds, but Marcus Kellerman's voice carried deadly precision as he spoke into the payphone during his allotted evening call. 3 days of jail food and orange jumpsuits had done nothing to diminish the predatory intelligence that had built his criminal network, and his forced isolation had provided ample time to plan revenge against the maintenance worker who'd destroyed months of careful preparation. "Vinny, it's Marcus," he said, his voice carrying none of the defeat his current circumstances might suggest. "Time to discuss that business proposition we talked about." "Vincent, Vinny," Torino answered from his office above a Queens auto repair shop that served as headquarters for drug distribution operations spanning 3 boroughs. At 38, the mid-level dealer had built his organization through careful territorial expansion and strategic partnerships with local muscle, exactly the kind of opportunity that Kellerman's Iron Fist Academy had represented before Jackie Chan's intervention. "Heard you had some trouble with a movie star," Vinny replied, his tone mixing amusement with genuine interest. "Embarrassing for a tough guy like you." Kellerman's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled as he outlined the proposal that would transform personal revenge into profitable criminal enterprise. The Iron Fist Academy's strategic location and established intimidation network could serve as the perfect front for drug operations, while Kellerman's martial arts students provided ready-made enforcers who were already feared throughout the neighborhood. "Jackie Chan thinks he's protecting that community," Kellerman explained. "But community centers make perfect distribution hubs. Lots of foot traffic, multiple entrances, activities that provide cover for product movement. Take out the old man, claim the territory, and we're looking at expansion that pays for itself within 6 months." Vinny's interest was immediately evident in his voice. The Elmhurst neighborhood had been on his target list for months, but previous attempts at establishment had been frustrated by the area's unusual cohesion and the community center's role as a unifying focal point. Kellerman's insider knowledge and existing network of intimidation provided exactly the leverage needed to crack that unity. "What's your timeline?" Vinny asked, already calculating logistics for the operation that would require coordination between drug trafficking, territorial acquisition, and the elimination of a legitimate action movie legend who'd proven surprisingly resilient for someone approaching 70 years old. "My bail hearing's next week," Kellerman replied. "Lawyers think they can get me out on technicalities, evidence problems, chain of custody issues, witness intimidation possibilities. Give me 10 days outside, and I'll hand you that neighborhood on a platter." The conversation continued with the businesslike efficiency of criminals who viewed violence as simply another tool for market expansion. Vinny's resources included not just street dealers and drug supplies, but access to weapons, corrupt officials, and enforcement specialists who could handle problems that required more sophistication than simple intimidation. "One thing, Marcus," Vinny warned as the call neared its time limit. "This Jackie Chan situation gets handled permanently. I don't need some geriatric action hero becoming a symbol for community resistance. Dead legends can't inspire anybody. Kellerman's agreement was immediate and enthusiastic. His humiliation at Jackie's hands had transformed professional embarrassment into personal obsession that could only be satisfied through the complete destruction of everything the maintenance worker represented. He hung up the payphone. Kellerman's smile carried the cold satisfaction of someone whose careful planning was about to transform momentary defeat into overwhelming victory. Jackie Chan had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. Tuesday morning brought the kind of crisp October air that made New York feel alive with possibility. But Jackie's arrival at the community center was met with police cars and the grim expressions of Detective Lisa Moreau and her crime scene team. The sight of official vehicles surrounding his workplace triggered the immediate recognition that his enemies had escalated beyond direct confrontation into the systematic warfare he'd hoped to avoid. "Mr. Chan," Detective Moreau said professionally, though her tone carried apologetic undertones that suggested she understood the implications of what was about to unfold. "I have a search warrant for these premises based on an anonymous tip regarding illegal drug storage in areas under your exclusive maintenance access." The search proceeded with the mechanical thoroughness of police procedure, but Jackie's trained awareness immediately recognized the sophisticated nature of the frame operation. The cocaine discovered behind the boiler in the mechanical room was positioned exactly where he'd been working when Amy's screams first drew his attention, a detail that could only have been known by someone with intimate knowledge of the building's layout and his work schedule. "This is professional placement," Jackie observed quietly to Detective Moreau as her team photographed the evidence. "Whoever planted this knew my routine, my access patterns, the building's surveillance blind spots. This isn't random criminal activity, it's targeted character assassination." Rose Martinez arrived with a folder containing 3 months' worth of documentation that she'd maintained as part of her community organizing efforts. Her union background had taught her that fighting institutional power required meticulous record-keeping, and her files provided alibis, witness statements, and timeline evidence that created reasonable doubt about Jackie's involvement. Jackie was helping Mrs. Peterson with her wheelchair in the main lobby when that anonymous call came in. Rose announced to Detective Moreau, producing time-stamped security footage from the community center's main entrance. "He's been under community observation for weeks because of the threats. No way he could have accessed that basement without dozens of witnesses." Tommy Ricci's police connections proved invaluable as he coordinated with Detective Moreau to trace the anonymous tip's origin. His law enforcement experience recognized the tactical sophistication behind evidence placement that was designed to remove Jackie from the community without requiring direct violence that might provoke further resistance. "Professional job," Tommy confirmed after reviewing the crime scene photographs. "Whoever did this understands police procedure, evidence protocols, legal system timing. This wasn't planned by street dealers. This was orchestrated by someone with serious criminal enterprise resources." Danny Kim's arrival provided the crucial intelligence that transformed suspicion into actionable information. His guilt over months of silence regarding Kellerman's criminal activities had motivated him to conduct his own surveillance of Iron Fist Academy operations, including documenting visits from individuals who clearly weren't interested in martial arts training. "I saw him," Danny reported, producing cell phone photographs taken from his apartment window. "Carl Morrison, big guy with prison tattoos, works for Vinnie Torino's organization. He was around the building Monday night around 11 p.m., acting like he belonged here, but obviously casing the place." The photographs provided visual evidence that corroborated the timeline established by community witnesses, creating enough reasonable doubt to prevent immediate arrest while establishing probable cause for investigating the real perpetrators. Detective Moreau's expression suggested professional frustration with criminals who thought they could manipulate police resources for personal revenge. Amy Rodriguez's arrival with her lawyer and detailed written statement proved decisive in dismantling the frame operation. Her testimony about Kellerman's previous boasts regarding connections who could plant evidence on anyone provided direct motive evidence, while security footage showing Morrison's late-night visit established opportunity and means for the crime. Mr. Kellerman specifically mentioned having contacts who could make problems disappear or create problems for enemies. Amy's statement read, He said that real power meant controlling both legal and illegal resources to achieve objectives that direct violence couldn't accomplish. As the charges were dropped pending further investigation, Detective Moreau provided Jackie with a quiet warning that carried implications extending far beyond simple criminal harassment. Someone wants you out of the picture badly enough to risk a felony frame job, she said. This level of sophistication suggests organized crime involvement with resources you need to take seriously. Watch your back, Mr. Chan. These people play for keeps. Wednesday evening's darkness settled over Elmhurst like a suffocating blanket as Jackie worked late in the community center, installing additional security cameras and reinforcing locks that had proven inadequate against increasingly sophisticated criminal pressure. The building's age and peaceful design had never been intended to withstand the kind of systematic assault that Kellerman's allies were mounting with military precision. The telephone's shrill ring cut through the evening quiet. Like an alarm, its urgency immediately triggering Jackie's combat-trained awareness that something had gone catastrophically wrong. Amy Rodriguez's voice came through the receiver as barely more than a terrified whisper, her words carrying the desperate quality of someone who understood that her next few sentences might determine whether she lived or died. Mr. Chan, Amy, breathe. The sound of duct tape being ripped in the background providing horrifying context for her situation. They took me from the hospital parking lot. I'm at the Iron Fist Academy. They said if you don't come alone in 1 hour, they'll make sure nobody ever finds me. The line went dead for several seconds before Rick Stone's voice replaced Amy's, his tone carrying the satisfied malice of someone who believed he'd finally gained the upper hand in a conflict that had humiliated him repeatedly. The younger man's words were carefully chosen to provoke exactly the response he was seeking while establishing psychological pressure that would force Jackie into tactical disadvantage. 1 hour, old man, Stone announced. Come alone. No police, no backup, no clever tricks. Walk through our front door like the hero you think you are, and maybe the girl lives long enough to watch you die. Refuse, and she disappears tonight, permanently. Jackie set down the phone with deliberate care, his mind immediately shifting into tactical assessment mode as he weighed options that ranged from impossible to suicidal. Calling police risked Amy's life and would likely result in a hostage situation that could end in multiple casualties. But walking into an obvious trap meant facing enemies who'd had days to prepare advantages while he'd be operating blind in hostile territory. The community center's main phone rang again before he could formulate a complete response plan. This time, Rick Stone's voice carried additional menace as he provided details that demonstrated just how thoroughly Jackie's situation had been compromised by forces with resources extending far beyond simple martial arts instruction. By the way, Stone added with obvious satisfaction, we're broadcasting this live on social media. Thousands of viewers are going to watch the great Jackie Chan get destroyed by real fighters. Your reputation dies tonight along with your body, and everyone who supported you gets to see what happens to heroes in the real world. The technological sophistication of the threat revealed criminal enterprise involvement that transformed personal revenge into public spectacle designed to break community resistance through psychological warfare. Jackie understood that he was being positioned not just as a victim, but as an example that would terrorize anyone else who might consider standing up to systematic intimidation. Moving quickly through the community center, Jackie left voicemail messages for Tommy Ricci, Rose Martinez, and Detective Moreau, providing what tactical intelligence he possessed about the situation while acknowledging that official help would arrive too late to prevent Amy's murder if he delayed his response waiting for backup. The walk across the street to the Iron Fist Academy felt like crossing into enemy territory, with each step taking him further from the community that had become his adopted family and closer to a confrontation that had been engineered to showcase his destruction to the widest possible audience. The academy's entrance stood open like the mouth of a predator, with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk in deceptive invitation. Through the windows, Jackie could see cameras positioned at strategic angles and dozens of figures moving in the upper levels. Clear evidence that this wasn't just an ambush, but a carefully orchestrated execution designed to serve as both entertainment and warning. As he approached the threshold, Jackie understood that he was walking into the most dangerous situation of his entire career. facing enemies who had every advantage except the one that mattered most. They had underestimated what a true hero was willing to sacrifice to protect an innocent life. The Iron Fist Academy's interior had been transformed into a gladiatorial arena designed for maximum psychological impact and optimal camera coverage. 20 fighters filled the converted warehouse's multiple levels, a mixture of Kellerman's most devoted students and Vinnie Torino's criminal enforcers who brought weapons training and professional violence experience that elevated the threat far beyond anything Jackie had faced during his movie career. Rick Stone stood on the Academy's upper level wearing his black GI-like ceremonial armor, his position allowing him to survey the tactical killing ground that had been prepared during days of meticulous planning. Multiple camera angles captured every corner of the space, while streaming live to social media platforms where thousands of viewers were gathering to witness what Stone promised would be the definitive destruction of Jackie Chan's legendary reputation. Ladies and gentlemen, Stone announced to both his in-person audience and online viewers, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone who believed victory was assured through superior numbers and careful preparation. Tonight you're going to see what happens when movie magic meets real-world brutality. The great Jackie Chan thinks he can protect this neighborhood, but legends die just like everyone else. Through the Academy's skylights, Jackie could see Amy Rodriguez tied to a chair on the building's rooftop, her position chosen to be visible from the ground floor while remaining inaccessible without fighting through every level of the building. The tactical challenge was immediately apparent. Reach Amy while surviving waves of attackers who had home field advantage and unlimited time to prepare their assault strategies. The live stream's viewer count climbed rapidly as word spread across social media platforms, creating exactly the kind of public spectacle that would transform Jackie's potential defeat into permanent psychological warfare against community resistance. Stone's commentary provided context for viewers who might not understand the broader implications of what they were witnessing. This old man thinks he can stand against the Iron Fist, Stone continued, gesturing toward the fighters positioned throughout the building's multiple levels. But we represent the future, young, strong, uncompromised by Hollywood fantasies about heroism. Time to show the world what real martial arts looks like. The first wave of attackers came from the ground floor weight room, their assault coordinated to test Jackie's defensive capabilities while preserving the stronger fighters for subsequent waves. What followed showcased the fundamental difference between movie choreography and actual combat. Jackie's legendary improvisation skills had never been simply entertainment, but real-world problem-solving adapted for cinematic presentation. Barbells became projectile weapons that cleared corridors with devastating efficiency. Exercise machines were transformed into barriers that channeled attacks into predictable patterns. Even the weight room's mirrors served tactical purposes, providing sight lines that allowed Jackie to track multiple opponents while creating disorienting reflections that confused attackers who trained in environments where visual deception wasn't a factor. The second floor's mirror dance studios presented different challenges as reflections multiplied opponents and created spatial disorientation that worked against both attacker and defender. Jackie's solution involved shattering strategic mirror panels to eliminate false targets while using the resulting glass fragments as area denial weapons that limited his enemy's movement options. But the building's design worked against him, as much as his improvisational skills worked in his favor. Each level required fighting through defenders who knew the terrain intimately, while he was operating in unfamiliar territory with limited resources and no backup. The tactical mathematics were brutally simple, 20 against 1, with the enemy holding both positional advantage and the high ground where Amy was being held. By the time Jackie reached the third-floor traditional training area, his accumulated injuries and depleted stamina were beginning to show despite his legendary conditioning. The younger fighters recognized these signs of weakness and pressed their advantage with weapons training that transformed the Academy's traditional martial arts equipment into modern battlefield implements. The live stream's viewer count exceeded 50,000 as audiences watched Jackie Chan apparently being systematically overwhelmed by opponents who'd studied his techniques and prepared specific countermeasures. Stone's commentary provided triumphant narration as the legend who'd inspired generations of action movie fans seemed to be facing inevitable defeat. And that, Stone announced as Jackie collapsed on the building's upper level, is how legends die, beaten and broken by the next generation who refuse to live in the past. The stream showed Jackie motionless on the Academy's rooftop while Kellerman stood over him in victory. But what viewers couldn't see was the betrayal that was about to transform triumph into catastrophe for everyone involved. Vincent Torino's arrival on the Iron Fist Academy rooftop brought 6 armed men and the cold realization that Marcus Kellerman had been used. The drug dealer's expensive suit contrasted sharply with the martial arts setting as he surveyed Jackie's unconscious form and Amy's bound condition with predatory satisfaction. "Beautiful work, Marcus, but playtime's over," Vinny announced dismissively. "This building becomes my distribution center now. You were always expendable, just needed someone to eliminate the Jackie Chan problem and destabilize community resistance." Kellerman's confusion transformed to horror as Vinny's men turned weapons on the Iron Fist students. Smoke began filling the lower levels as arson eliminated evidence. The betrayal was complete. Dead legends couldn't inspire resistance, and dead witnesses couldn't testify about criminal enterprise operations in what was meant to be a clean territorial takeover. Jackie's legendary resilience overcame punishment that would have killed most men his age, consciousness returning with Smoke's acrid smell and rising heat from floors below. Marcus Kellerman lay nearby, also betrayed and trapped by forces that viewed them both as expendable liabilities in criminal expansion plans. "Why save me?" Kellerman whispered as Jackie offered assistance to his former enemy. "I tried to destroy you, because that's what heroes do," Jackie replied, helping Kellerman toward Amy's unconscious form. Their survival required cooperation. Jackie's movie stunt experience combining with Kellerman's building knowledge to create impossible escape routes through ventilation systems and external architecture. Working together, they implemented Jackie's plan using window washing equipment and structural weak points to bridge the gap between buildings. The Iron Fist Academy collapsed behind them as they reached the community center's roof, Amy still breathing but requiring immediate medical attention. The community center's rooftop provided temporary safety, but Amy Rodriguez needed immediate medical intervention for severe smoke inhalation. Jackie applied rescue breathing while assessing their 4-story descent to street level where paramedics waited. Below, Elmhurst had transformed into a civilian defense force. Rose Martinez directed senior citizens with garden hoses, Tommy Ricci coordinated with firefighters, and Danny Kim led former Iron Fist students protecting the community center alongside people they'd once terrorized. "I was wrong about everything," Kellerman whispered, witnessing his former students working with community members. "I thought strength meant domination, but they're stronger together than they ever were under my control." Paramedics stabilized Amy during ambulance transport while Detective Moreau arrived to process evidence of organized crime operations. The neighborhood's unified resistance had documented everything needed to dismantle Vinny Torino's criminal enterprise through social media streams and witness testimony. Dawn revealed Elmhurst fundamentally transformed by 12 hours that tested every assumption about community strength versus criminal power. The Iron Fist Academy smoldered in ruins, but the community center stood intact, surrounded by residents who discovered collective courage could overcome impossible odds when properly organized. Rose Martinez surveyed reparable damage while coordinating with Tommy Ricci to process witness statements documenting Vinny Torino's operations. Danny Kim worked with former students providing intelligence about criminal connections they'd witnessed but not understood. Amy Rodriguez's hospital return provided emotional victory, her survival representing triumph over forces that had seemed unstoppable. "I was never alone," she told the gathered crowd. "You were all fighting for me, for each other, for neighborhoods belonging to people who live in them." Vincent Torino's capture by coordinated community police action dismantled his entire criminal network, proving ordinary people could defeat organized crime through solidarity. 3 months later, spring sunshine illuminated Elmhurst's transformation as the community center reopened with Jackie Chan as official head instructor. The former Iron Fist Academy site became the Community Defense Training Center. with Marcus Kellerman completing court-ordered service as assistant instructor. Detective Morrow announced Vincent Torino's conviction had dismantled his entire network. "You proved ordinary people can defeat organized crime through unity," she told the gathered crowd. "Your model is spreading to other threatened neighborhoods." Amy Rodriguez addressed the ceremony. "They hurt me because I was alone, but couldn't destroy us because we refused to stay alone. Mr. Chan saved me, but we saved each other. Heroes aren't individuals. They're communities choosing to protect everyone who belongs." The neighborhood had discovered strength through solidarity rather than individual power. Jackie's first official class mixed ages from Amy's 7-year-old grandmother to former Iron Fist members seeking redemption. Marcus Kellerman wore a white belt despite advanced skills, symbolizing his commitment to learning proper martial arts philosophy he'd never been taught. "Strength isn't about what you can do to others," Kellerman explained to teenagers learning self-defense. "Real strength is what you're willing to do for others. That's what Mr. Chan taught me when he saved my life after I'd tried to destroy his." Amy worked as teaching assistant, her survival story inspiring young women that martial arts should build confidence, not dependence. Danny Kim liaised between reformed students and neighborhood security networks while studying criminal justice. The training center emphasized character over violence, protection over domination, community strength over individual threats. Detective Morrow's final report revealed the community's resistance had disrupted criminal operations across 3 boroughs, with other neighborhoods implementing similar defense networks. Their systematic documentation became a template for civilian police cooperation. Marcus Kellerman's testimony helped prosecute remaining criminal network members, his cooperation demonstrating genuine commitment to repairing damage from his organized crime associations. Vincent Torino received 40 years federal prison, ending his career and deterring other enterprises from targeting organized neighborhoods. Amy Rodriguez was accepted to multiple universities for social work studies, focusing on community organizing and trauma recovery to help others avoid the isolation she'd experienced. The community center expanded programs to include conflict resolution, emergency response, and civic engagement, with Rose Martinez's community board election representing broader political influence beyond crime prevention. 6 months after the Iron Fist Academy's destruction, Elmhurst attracted visitors seeking to understand how ordinary people defeated organized crime through collective action. The community center hosted delegations sharing tactics that proved effective against criminal intimidation. Jackie's morning routine, unlocking doors, checking equipment, preparing classes, had evolved from anonymous refuge to community leadership, balancing legendary status with genuine human connections. Multiple generations practiced together, learning character development alongside physical training. A new student asked Jackie the question he received daily: "When will I be strong enough to protect people like you do?" Jackie's response embodied everything the community learned: "You're already strong enough. Strength isn't about what you can do to others. It's about what you're willing to do for others." That strength has no age limit and no expiration date. Now let's practice. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.